am Veronica, and this is the story of how I became the owner of my ex-husband's favorite restaurant, the Gilded Spoon, purely for the cathartic pleasure of watching his world fall apart in a single beautiful moment. My ex-husband, Marcus, had always been a man whose pride was only surpassed by his cruelty. When we divorced a year ago, he hadn't just walked out. He had swaggered out, leaving me financially gutted and emotionally destroyed. The last thing he ever said to me, the line that played on repeat in my mind, was, "You'll be back, Veronica. You have nowhere to go. You'll be begging me to take you back within a year." It was the emotional equivalent of a declaration of war. That year I had one goal: prove him wrong spectacularly. Yesterday, exactly 12 months and 3 days later, I walked into the Gilded Spoon, where he was hosting a private tasting, and delivered my victory. Marcus looked up, annoyingly smug, asking, "What is this? The walk of shame?" I didn't say a word. I simply placed the freshly inked bill of sale on his pristine chef's table. His smile vanished. I waited for his eyes to register the name of the new owner, Veronica Hayes. Then I looked him dead in the eye, savoring the shock that turned instantly to terror. I leaned in and whispered, "You were right, Marcus." Came back. But not to beg. My heartbeat thundered against my ribs, a loud, celebratory drumbeat drowning out the gentle clinking of silverware. Marcus was speechless, his jaw slack, a rare, beautiful sight. "This is a joke," he finally sputtered, his voice cracking. "How? This is my place." It wasn't his place, not truly. It was a place he leveraged, a financial anchor he believed I could never touch. The Gilded Spoon was his personal kingdom, a monument to his culinary ego, and the place he often brought his mistresses while we were still married. It represented everything he valued: prestige, control, and money I didn't have. I took a deep breath, letting the moment hang, heavy and intoxicating. I wasn't just firing him from a job. I was dismantling his identity. As of 2 o'clock this afternoon, the deeds were transferred, I informed him, pushing the signed documents closer. "I own the building, the inventory, and every last sticky menu. Which means, Marcus, I own your employment contract." The room, previously filled with hushed food critics and wine experts, was now silent, the air thick with disbelief. His pathetic denial only fueled my resolve. I remembered the day I was blindsided by the divorce papers. Marcus had systematically moved assets, confident in my ignorance of high finance. He kept the Gilded Spoon safe because it was his passion project. The only thing he cared about that wasn't himself. He'd signed the prenuptial agreement, assuring me I'd be taken care of, but leaving me with barely enough to rent a studio apartment. When he delivered the infamous begging line, he was wearing a silk tie I had bought him and standing in the foyer of the house my family money had funded. It was the arrogance, the utter certainty that I was weak and dependent, that hurt more than the financial betrayal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about his complete lack of respect for my intelligence, my resilience, and my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. That comment became my North Star. I stopped crying and I started calculating. The moment I closed that front door behind him, I vowed that he would look at me again, and that the look would be one of genuine, debilitating fear. I had a year and I had a plan. The foundation of my revenge was laid when I realized Marcus's Achilles heel wasn't women or liquor. It was debt. He was always playing the high roller, but beneath the veneer of success, his business was leveraged to the hilt. After the divorce, my lawyer, a brilliant woman named Anya, discovered a hidden clause in the restaurant's commercial mortgage. A clause that allowed a hostile takeover if a certain percentage of the debt was acquired by a single entity within a short time frame. Marcus had been so fixated on protecting the equity that he'd forgotten about the vulnerability of the debt. I didn't have the cash to buy the restaurant outright, but I realized I didn't need to. I only needed to buy the bank. This discovery was the first adrenaline shot to my system. It was complex, requiring securing financing from multiple sources, but it was legal, ruthless, and entirely in character with the financial education I'd received before Marcus convinced me to be a stay-at-home muse. I knew I could exploit his greed and overconfidence. My first official meeting with my newly assembled team felt less like a business strategy session and more like a heist planning committee. Anya, the legal shark, laid out the debt structure, and my financial advisor, a quiet man named Felix, outlined the funding path. I didn't want Marcus to know who was buying the debt, so we created a shell corporation, Phoenix Hospitality, registered in an obscure jurisdiction. The sheer complexity was exhilarating. I had to learn the language of mezzanine financing and collateralized debt obligations overnight. My emotional core, the deep-seated hurt from Marcus's dismissiveness, became fuel for late nights spent reviewing spreadsheets. The high stakes were clear. If I failed, I would lose everything I had left, and Marcus would truly win. But the thought of his face, radiating that smug confidence, was a better motivator than any cup of coffee. I had transformed the pain of his betrayal into a weapon, a precise and devastating financial instrument aimed directly at his greatest love, the gilded spoon. The irony of the gilded spoon was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Marcus truly believed it was his destiny, a testament to his genius. But he'd forgotten who funded the initial startup, who kept the lights on during the lean years, and who introduced him to the city's major food critics. Me. The $500,000 I'd inherited from my grandmother was the invisible foundation beneath his gleaming marble floors. It was money I never asked back in the divorce, believing the clean break was worth the financial loss. I was wrong. The emotional cost of his cruelty required a higher payment. The target was worth over $10 million, far beyond my personal means, even after settling the divorce. But thanks to Marcus's high-risk, high-reward approach, the majority of that value was borrowed. My plan was simple. Purchase the toxic debt package that represented nearly 60% of the restaurant's liability. This would immediately grant Phoenix Hospitality control over the loan terms and, crucially, the right to call in the loan. The bidding process to acquire the debt was conducted in total secrecy. Marcus, I learned through subtle channels we had established, was entirely unaware the bank was even attempting to offload the riskier portion of the loan. He was too busy entertaining his new young girlfriend and basking in his reflected glory. He believed his relationship with the bank manager was unbreakable. This was the first major twist. The bank manager, Mrs. Petrov, was an old friend of my mother's who had always disapproved of Marcus's treatment of me. She couldn't ethically breach client confidentiality, but she could certainly expedite the paperwork for a very competitive, well-capitalized shell company called Phoenix Hospitality. My silent partner, who provided the majority of the needed capital, was introduced to me by Anya. It was my Uncle William, a retired tech mogul, who I hadn't spoken to in years. He wasn't just loaning me money. He was investing in the performance art of revenge. Marcus always treated you like background scenery, Veronica. Let's give him a finale, he'd said with a wicked grin. Marcus was starting to feel the heat, but he completely misdiagnosed the source. He noticed a few strange queries from the bank's compliance department, asking for updated financial disclosures. Standard practice, he assumed, but unusually intense. He blamed his head chef, Antoine, for slight discrepancies in inventory and threatened to fire him, thereby alienating the one person who actually kept the kitchen running. His arrogance was my greatest asset. He couldn't conceive that the weak, dependent woman he divorced was maneuvering complex, leveraged acquisitions. He believed I was still crying over him in a rented studio. Every time he yelled at his staff or ignored an official letter, he tightened the noose I was weaving. The beauty of the plan was that it was all happening around him, fueled by his own negligence and hubris. I saw him once at a local market. He didn't even acknowledge me, too busy talking loudly into his phone about a potential expansion deal. His blind confidence was the best kind of camouflage. The final 2 weeks before the closing date were a blur of legal maneuvering, non-disclosure agreements, and sleepless nights. We had to ensure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Marcus was vindictive and would sue on any technicality. The biggest challenge was securing the full transfer of ownership without triggering an internal audit that would expose Phoenix Hospitality's true beneficial owner. Anya suggested we use the restaurant's upcoming mandatory annual maintenance closure as cover. The official reason for the paperwork flurry would be a restructuring of operational liability, tied to the maintenance budget. Marcus signed off on everything without reading the fine print, annoyed that the legalese interrupted his tasting schedule. He was a chef, not a businessman, and his disdain for paperwork was legendary. The high stakes meant I felt the pressure of every signature. If I messed up, the shame would be unbearable. But the thought of his smug face, that was the anti-anxiety pill I needed. The final day arrived. I sat in Anya's office, the air thick with tension, reviewing the last set of documents. The official transfer of the loan to Phoenix, followed by the immediate, legally mandated foreclosure that converted the debt into equity. This was it, the legal mechanism that made me the owner. I picked up the pen, feeling the weight of the past year in my hand. It wasn't just a pen. It was a hammer, ready to smash the glass cage Marcus had trapped me in. I signed Veronica Hayes, feeling the new name solidify around me. Not Marcus's ex-wife, but a principal investor. The moment the document was notarized, Anya smiled, a true, satisfied, predatory grin. Congratulations, CEO Hayes. You now own the Gilded Spoon, building, contents and staff, she said. The paperwork confirmed Marcus's employment was now under the new entity. His contract contained a clause allowing immediate termination, at the owner's discretion with cause. His abuse and financial negligence were our cause. The trap was sprung, and the victim was still utterly clueless, preparing his final tasting menu for an audience that no longer mattered. The next morning, I sent Marcus a formal professional email from Phoenix Hospitality's legal department. The subject line, Mandatory Emergency Ownership Meeting, the Gilded Spoon. The body stated that the new owners required an immediate meeting to discuss a critical financial review. I knew he would scoff at the emergency part but rushed to attend, convinced he would be able to charm or bully the new, distant investors into compliance. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed not in my typical business attire, but in a custom-tailored scarlet suit, a dramatic departure from the muted colors he always preferred me to wear. I wanted him to see me, truly see me, for the first time in years. I had the official termination notice printed on heavy stock, tucked into an ostrich leather folder. The stage was set in the restaurant's opulent private dining room, the room he used to parade his status. I rearranged the table settings, moving his favorite chair to the far corner, a small psychological maneuver to assert immediate dominance. Marcus swaggered in 20 minutes late, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and less faintly of the arrogance that preceded him. He didn't even glance at me, assuming I was the new executive assistant there to take notes. He addressed the empty chairs at the table. "All right, where are these new owners?" he snapped, checking his designer watch. "I've got a Michelin reviewer coming for dinner, so let's make this quick and painless." I let him stand there for a full 30 seconds, enjoying the slow boil of his impatience. Finally I cleared my throat. He spun around, and his eyes finally landed on me, sitting calmly at the head of the long table. The initial confusion on his face morphed instantly into disdain. "Veronica, what in God's name are you doing here? Did you get lost looking for the bus station?" he sneered, the words hitting me like the cold steel they were intended to be. I simply smiled, a genuine ice-cold smile of complete control. I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my suit, maintaining the perfect eye contact he was now desperately trying to break. "I am the new owner, Marcus," I stated, my voice low and steady. I watched the cognitive dissonance fight on his face. He actually laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving bark. "You. Don't be ridiculous. You barely balance a checkbook. Did your rich uncle buy a share or something? You're still begging for attention, Veronica." That was the moment of full catharsis. That was the last time he would ever speak to me with such condescension. I walked slowly around the table, taking the precious time to enjoy every step, until I was standing directly across from him. I opened the ostrich folder. "The share is 100% Marcus." I bought the debt, converted the equity, and the Phoenix Hospitality acquisition is complete, I said, placing the official deed of ownership directly under his hand. Marcus slapped the papers away, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson. This is illegal. You can't just. You don't have the capital. You're trying to harass me. I'll call my lawyers, he roared, his voice echoing in the polished room. I simply reached into the folder again and pulled out the termination notice. The document was clean, clear, and utterly binding. You are correct that I don't have your capital, Marcus. But I have mine. And my lawyers were in the room when I signed every document, I countered, pushing the second paper across. As of this moment, your employment as head chef and general manager is terminated, effective immediately with cause. Please gather your personal effects and vacate the premises within 1 hour. I watched his strong, arrogant hands tremble as he picked up the notice. He had always been so meticulously controlled, and seeing that control shatter was the ultimate reward. The rage on Marcus's face was quickly replaced by a desperate, panicked calculation. He tried the familiar manipulative route. Veronica, baby, listen to me, he pleaded, reaching out a hand. You're clearly upset. We can talk about this. Remember all the good times. We were a team. I need this restaurant, darling. Please, let's talk about a new contract. I'll take a pay cut. I'll take you out to dinner. It was pathetic, and for a fleeting second, I felt the familiar pull of pity. But I remembered the begging line, the empty bank accounts, and the years of emotional sidelining. That pity evaporated instantly. The only thing we are discussing is your severance package, which is exactly $0, I stated flatly. Your cause for termination includes gross financial negligence discovered during the review, including unauthorized expense reports and breach of fiduciary duty. Anya will send you the full list. Now out. His face finally crumpled, his eyes filling with tears of pure, self-pitying defeat. It wasn't sadness for what he'd lost. It was despair over his loss of power. The aftermath of Marcus's forced departure was perhaps the most satisfying twist of all. The staff, gathered in the main dining room, witnessed the entire loud, humiliating ordeal. I expected some loyalty to the chef who hired them, but the moment he stormed out, knocking over a display stand, the room erupted in a collective cheer. Head chef Antoine, the man Marcus had falsely accused of financial misconduct, stepped forward, his face etched with relief. Thank you, madam, he said, bowing low. He was a tyrant. We've been waiting for someone to deliver this place from his ego. I suddenly realized my revenge wasn't just personal. It was organizational. The staff, from the busboys to the sommelier, had endured his cruelty for years. This was an unexpected layer of catharsis, transforming my private vengeance into a public act of liberation. I immediately reinstated Antoine's autonomy, gave everyone a 10% immediate raise, and promised a transparent, respectful management structure. The emotional payoff was exponential. Marcus, predictably, didn't go quietly into the night. Within hours, I received a scathing letter from his personal lawyer, full of threats of litigation, alleging fraud, collusion, and emotional duress. The letter demanded I cease operations and revert ownership immediately. I simply forwarded the email to Anya. Her response was a single word: predictable. She informed me that Marcus's current lawyer was a low-cost, high-volume operator who hadn't researched the offshore registration of Phoenix Hospitality. Anya, in turn, had prepared a 500-page dossier, detailing every instance of Marcus's documented financial impropriety and workplace abuse, all collected discreetly over the past 6 months. She sent a 2-sentence reply that afternoon. Phoenix Hospitality is fully compliant. We welcome discovery and will pursue defamation. The silence that followed was deafening. My preparedness against his predictable legal tantrum was another layer of empowerment. The true moment of power came when I sat across from Marcus's cheap lawyer, Mr. Denton, a few days later. Denton tried to intimidate me with jargon about corporate veil piercing, but I had Anya sitting beside me, radiating quiet confidence. I laid out the full financial truth. My team had not just purchased the debt. They had audited the books before the acquisition. We discovered that Marcus had been running a second set of shadow books. The twist was that he wasn't doing it just to skim cash. He was funneling money to a new, unregistered corporation that was secretly funding his mistress's failing boutique business. This was not just grounds for termination. It was potential criminal fraud. When I presented the evidence, Denton's bravado evaporated. He realized he wasn't dealing with an angry ex-wife. He was dealing with a meticulously prepared, well-funded adversary. He advised Marcus to drop the case immediately. The investigation into the shadow books revealed an even deeper, more damaging twist that explained the restaurant's entire situation. Marcus wasn't just skimming to fund his mistress. He was deeply indebted to a man named Silas, a known figure in the city's underground financial scene, a loan shark disguised as a private equity investor. Marcus had been using the restaurant's future profits as collateral for his personal high-interest loans, entirely bypassing the bank and, crucially, hiding it from me and his legal team. The purchase of the Gilded Spoon, which I thought was a revenge move, had actually saved it from Silas's aggressive and illegal takeover plans. Marcus had been on the verge of losing everything anyway, but in a much darker, more violent way. I had unknowingly snatched the restaurant from a villain far worse than my ex-husband. The emotional core shifted. My revenge wasn't just about my dignity. It was about saving the staff and the reputation of the restaurant from an inevitable collapse into darkness. The discovery of Silas's involvement and the extent of Marcus's secret financial ruin provided the necessary emotional context. The cheating was one thing, but running the restaurant into the ground with loan sharks was another. It showed a complete lack of regard for the livelihoods of 50 people. The final damning discovery was an exchange of emails between Marcus and his mistress, Amelia, discussing how they would liquidate the restaurant's high-end wine cellar and use the cash to start a new life once Silas inevitably took over. The restaurant, his supposed great love, was just a means to an end, a disposable asset. This shifted my emotional investment from mere spite to protective stewardship. I was no longer just Veronica, the ex-wife. I was Veronica, the reluctant savior. The feeling of empowerment was immense, realizing that I was the one with the clarity, the foresight, and the strength to clean up his narcissistic mess. My revenge was now an act of corporate responsibility. The confrontation with Amelia was the next logical escalation. I didn't want a messy, dramatic catfight. I wanted a clean, professional kill shot. We located her at her boutique, which was predictably struggling. I walked in, not as the scorned wife, but as the owner of the collateral. I presented her with the evidence of the financial scheme, the proof that the investment Marcus had promised her was actually stolen from the restaurant. She tried to play innocent, claiming she knew nothing, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. I gave her an ultimatum. Either cooperate fully with my legal team to expose Silas's connection to Marcus, or I would personally ensure that her boutique's paper trail was scrutinized by the IRS. She chose cooperation instantly. This wasn't about hurting her. It was about neutralizing Marcus's last allies and securing the restaurant's future. The revenge was evolving, becoming strategic, almost cold-blooded, but with a clear, firm heart. With Marcus and Amelia neutralized, I had to decide what to do with the Gilded Spoon. The initial plan was simply to fire him and sell it, recouping my investment. But after meeting the staff and realizing the restaurant's potential, I changed my mind. I saw the relief and hope in Antoine's eyes. This place wasn't Marcus's ego. It was their home, their livelihood. My revenge would be incomplete if I just cashed out. The ultimate victory would be transforming his monument to narcissism into a place of genuine, thriving excellence. I announced to the staff that I would not be selling. I was rebranding and reinvesting, naming Antoine the executive chef, and giving the entire team a stake in the profits. The staff's overwhelming gratitude was a reward far greater than any financial gain. My revenge was truly satisfying because it created something positive out of his destruction. The final, pathetic confrontation with Marcus came 2 weeks later. He called me from a blocked number. his voice weak and defeated. He wasn't yelling anymore. He was pleading. "Veronica, I lost everything. I'm staying on a friend's couch. Silas is looking for me," he whispered, sounding small and terrified. "Please just sell the restaurant back to me. I'll pay you whatever you want." The man who had dismissed me as disposable was now begging me to save him from the consequences of his own greed. "You will get every cent you deserve, Marcus," I replied calmly. "Which legally is nothing. The restaurant belongs to a consortium of people who value its integrity. You, on the other hand, are a liability. You had a chance to be a good man, Marcus, but you chose to be a victim of your own arrogance." I hung up the phone and blocked the number permanently. The finality was profound. The ultimate surprise twist was revealed during the restaurant's relaunch party. I had spent the last few months working tirelessly, not just on the finances, but on the new menu and concept, guided by Antoine. The new name was the Phoenix Table. It was elegant, fitting for a place that had risen from the ashes of betrayal. I stood on a small stage, giving a speech to the press and invited guests about the journey, when I introduced my Uncle William, the silent partner. Then, I introduced the other silent partner, the one who had handled the day-to-day complexities of the acquisition and helped me manage the transition. It wasn't Anya or Felix. It was Christopher, the architect of the new restaurant design, a quiet, brilliant man I had worked closely with. I announced our engagement. My revenge had not only brought me financial independence and catharsis but also a genuine, respectful partnership. A true, non-narcissistic love that Marcus could never comprehend. The satisfying resolution came 6 months later. The Phoenix Table was a resounding success, earning a prestigious Best New Restaurant award. Marcus was long gone. His name a forgotten curse. I was standing in the busy, buzzing kitchen with Antoine and Christopher, overseeing the dinner service. My revenge was complete, but the true triumph was the thriving business and the new life I had built. I realized Marcus's condescending words, "You'll be begging me to take you back," had been the greatest gift he could have given me. His cruelty had forged my strength. I looked out over the crowded, happy dining room, raised a glass of champagne to Christopher and whispered, "Here's to never begging again." My story, now circulating virally, wasn't just a revenge fantasy. It was a testament to the fact that emotional abuse doesn't define you, and that the best revenge is always living a life far bigger and better than the one they tried to keep you confined to. I had found my own gilded spoon, and this time it was all mine. The initial shock of the firing had been the adrenaline, but the long-term satisfaction was the restructuring of my entire life. I had taken control of my narrative. Marcus had tried to write my ending as a tragedy, but I rewrote the middle and created a triumphant finale. The press coverage was sensational, focusing on my pivot from housewife to hospitality CEO. Every article was a subtle, public humiliation for Marcus. The story was now running on all cylinders, garnering millions of views and comments. I had become the face of modern, empowered revenge. My image, the woman in the scarlet suit, was a symbol. I realized the true value of the restaurant wasn't the property or the profit, but the platform it gave me to share my story and inspire others who felt trapped by abusive partners. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I received a letter from Silas's legal team. He was suing Marcus for the defaulted loans and was trying to subpoena my new company's records. This was the final messy battle, but it was perfect. It ensured Marcus was tied up in legal debt for years to come, confirming his total financial destruction. I used the situation to my advantage, leveraging the legal battle as an opportunity to publicly expose Marcus's dangerous dealings. The press ate it up. My revenge was no longer about Marcus. It was about cleaning up the local business community and protecting the restaurant industry from shady financing. It felt less personal and more heroic. The unexpected consequence of the viral fame was the influx of support from other women who had suffered similar financial and emotional abuse. I started a small foundation, using a percentage of the Phoenix Table's profits to offer pro bono financial literacy courses to divorced women. This turned the sting of Marcus's betrayal into a positive, lasting legacy. My relationship with Christopher was the quiet anchor of the storm. He was the antithesis of Marcus. Supportive, kind, and genuinely impressed by my strength, not threatened by it. He saw the CEO in the scarlet suit, but he also saw Veronica, the woman who loved a challenge. He was my partner, not my puppet. One afternoon, I was reviewing the quarterly profits, which had tripled since Marcus's reign, when Antoine walked in. He handed me a framed, original menu from the Gilded Spoon, signed by every staff member. It was a gesture of appreciation that moved me more than any legal victory. It was a testament to the healthy, respectful culture we had built. The last time I saw Marcus was on the news. He was being interviewed outside the courthouse, looking disheveled and defeated, blaming me for his legal woes. The interviewer mentioned his ex-wife, Veronica Hayes, now a successful restaurateur. Marcus stammered, unable to speak, the fear and humiliation palpable through the screen. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just felt a profound sense of peace. The ghost of Marcus was finally exorcised from my life. I had taken his greatest weapon, his belief in my weakness, and turned it into the cornerstone of my power. The revenge was complete. The Phoenix table received its first Michelin star nomination. I threw a huge celebration for the staff, reminding them that this was their success too. I raised a toast, not to revenge, but to resilience. The journey had been costly, painful, and terrifying, but it had made me. I now serve a daily special called the Beggar's Plate, a luxurious, rich dish that is served on a silver platter, a quiet, internal joke only I and Christopher share. It is a reminder of the low point and the magnificent climb. I often think about that day in the private dining room, the moment I fired him. It wasn't the culmination. It was the beginning. The revenge was the ignition, but the building was the legacy. I had replaced bitterness with abundance. My story concluded not with hatred, but with a beautiful, thriving life. Marcus had bet on my failure. I bet on my own strength and I won. The Gilded Spoon was dead. Long live the Phoenix table.